In October 2017, 23-year-old Aiko Tamura went missing from where she was living outside of Tokyo. Her brother filed a report with the police and followed a few leads of his own without success. Then he looked at her Twitter account and saw she'd been in touch with someone he didn't recognize. The Twitter username was Hanging Pro and the page looked like this. And this is the message pinned to the top of the page. People are bullied all the time at school and work. And when you can't handle the places you go every day and the people there, that'll push you further and further mentally. I think lots of people are suffering and attempting suicide. Even if the news isn't covering it, I want to help these people. #suicide. Seems like a positive message, one that might have helped Aiko, who had been depressed. Aiko's mother had died the previous June. The 23-year-old moved into a group home in a suburb of Tokyo, and she became depressed. She tweeted, "I'm looking for someone who will die with me." And the man DM'd her saying, "Let's die together." Giving the man the benefit of the doubt that this is someone who tried hanging himself and is now using social media to share his story to help other people decide against suicide. But Aiko's brother realized, correctly, that the message could also mean something very different. So Aiko's brother tipped off the police, but they didn't have any easy way of identifying who was behind the anonymous page. So they went through all the posts that the account had posted publicly to find another woman he'd been talking to online. This woman, who turned out had once met the person, agreed to set up a more intimate meeting with herself as bait. So, on Halloween, this woman met the person at a train station while police watched the pair from a distance. Together, she and he went to his apartment. That was how police found a very infamous, gruesome murder house. Takahiro Shiraishi was born on 9th of October 1990. He was from Zama, Japan. Takahiro Shiraishi was your normal, average 20-something. He was cheerful, kind and polite, hardworking and very close to his family. He lived in Zuma so he could be closer to his father, who was living alone after his separation from his mother. According to one neighbor, the two spent a lot of time together. In fact, another neighbor reported that the older of the two would always speak of his son in glowing terms and always looked forward to them going for drinks. According to Takahiro's school friends, he and others played a sweet little game where they would take turns choking each other to the point of blacking out. This alone should have been enough to set off alarm bells, and not just where Shiraishi was concerned either. Anyone willing to indulge in strangulation for fun should definitely be on a watch list somewhere. Before his move to Zama, leaving his education, Shiraishi had worked as a sex scout who lures women into brothels to work in the sex industry in Kabukicho, Tokyo's biggest red light district. To do this, he would lure them into the nightclubs there and use his charm to persuade them to turn tricks for a living. At this stage, people had started warning locals about him, describing him as a creepy scout. Shiraishi then moved from Tokyo into an apartment in Zama in August 2017. His career as a sex scout was fruitful yet ultimately flawed. He was arrested in February 2017 for pimping out girls to the local brothels and was sentenced to a 14-month prison term. Unfortunately, this was suspended for 3 years, and if it hadn't been, then what followed would never have taken place. Finding himself unemployed, Shiraishi did what most people in his circumstances would do, and he would spend most of his days on the internet. It was here that he would start to hunt for 8 of the 9 poor souls who would become his victims. During his time as a sex scout, he'd used Twitter as a platform to coerce young girls into working the nightclubs for him. But now he would change tact and start preying on people who were at the end of their rope. He set up a new account in March 2017 and set about convincing suicidal women that he could help them achieve their goals and promised to die with them. His bio reportedly said, "I want to help people who are really in pain. Please DM me anytime." Sadly, this was a lie. Instead of giving them the send-off that they hoped for, those that replied to him were murdered in cold blood. In a 3-month period, he took the lives of 9 people. But it wasn't until Aiko's brother went out of his way to search for his missing sister that Shiraishi's crimes would come to light. So, on October 31st, 2017, they raided his flat and couldn't believe what they found. He had 9 heads stashed away in coolers and toolboxes around his home, along with various limbs and bones. In the face of such overwhelming evidence against him, he simply confessed. He explained via Twitter that he'd convinced his victims to meet up before drugging them. He then proceeded to assault them before strangling them to death. The only one of the 9 who wasn't a victim of this terrible plan was the boyfriend of the first person he killed. When he went to speak to Shiraishi after she had gone missing, he suffered the same fate as the others. Shiraishi then explained how he hacked the bodies up and threw chunks of flesh out with the garbage. This would explain why, as it was reported by someone living in the blocks of flats, he had the extractor fan running 24 hours a day. The alleged first victim, Mizuki Miura, a 21-year-old logistic company employee from Atsugi, Kanagawa, left a note at her family home saying she wanted to live alone. According to investigators, Shiraishi allegedly asked Miura to live with him and received 500,000 yen from her to rent an apartment. Shiraishi also said he did not have any hesitation in killing his first victim, nor others. The oldest victim, Hitomi Fujima, 26 years old, went missing after leaving her workplace earlier than usual on September 13th. She moved to Kasukabe with her husband and daughter in 2015. 17-year-old Akari Suda. She went missing after attending a school sports day on September 26. A high school senior had dreamed of becoming a manga artist and served as a leader of a junior high school art club where she drew a picture for the front page of a school booklet. The only male victim, Shogo Nishinaka, 20 years old, was allegedly killed after confronting Shiraishi about the whereabouts of his girlfriend, who was his first victim. He was known as an enthusiastic bass guitarist who played in a band while working at a facility for handicapped people. The youngest victim was Kureha Ishihara, 15 years old, a high school freshman in the town of Ora, Gunma Prefecture. Other victims were 23-year-old Aiko Tamura from Tokyo, who was the first victim identified by police, 17-year-old high school student Natsumi Kubo, and 19-year-old university student Hinako Sarashina, both Saitama Prefecture natives, and Kazumi Maruyama, 25-year-old, who worked at a convenience store in Yokohama. This case stunned Japan, as did the matter-of-fact way that Shiraishi relayed details of his crimes to the police. He was cold, calculating, and seemed to show zero remorse for his actions. This went against him at his trial. The judge said, "None of the 9 victims consented to be killed, including by silent consent. It is extremely grave that the lives of 9 young people were taken away. The dignity of the victims was trampled upon." He then sentenced Shiraishi to death. On October 1st, 2020, Shiraishi confessed to killing and dismembering the 9 people. He pled guilty to all the 9 murders. Before he committed the murders, Shiraishi had told his father his life had no meaning. On 15 December 2020, he was sentenced to death. He has indicated he will not appeal his sentence. Shiraishi's death sentence was finalized in January 2021 and he is currently awaiting execution.